Hi, and welcome back to Reddit Whispers. Distance is a strange thing. When you're working on a remote infrastructure project 1,000 miles from anything that feels like home, distance becomes your reality. It's in the crackle of a satellite phone call, in the time lag on a video chat, in the vast empty space on the bed beside you. For 2 years, I lived in that distance. I was a project manager on a massive hydroelectric dam project, living in a temporary world of prefabricated buildings and the constant, deafening roar of heavy machinery. It was grueling, isolated work, but it was lucrative. And every single paycheck, every hardship bonus, every dime I earned was for one purpose: our future. My wife, Cora, was the architect of that future. While I was in the wilderness, she was at home, curating our dream. The dream was an old, dilapidated Victorian house in a quiet, forgotten town, a beautiful, crumbling masterpiece that we were going to buy and restore together. It was our after, the life we would lead once my high-paying, soul-crushing job was done. We called it the Phoenix because we were going to raise it from the ashes. Our joint account was the foundation of that dream. It was more than a bank account. It was a symbol of our absolute, unwavering partnership. I was the earner, the one in the trenches, and she was the guardian, the one protecting the resources that would one day build our forever home. I trusted her completely. My trust in her was the one solid piece of ground in a life that was otherwise a sea of mud and concrete. The text message that ended my world arrived at 3 in the morning. I was in my small, sterile room after a brutal 18-hour shift. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a harsh, unwelcome sound in the dead of night. I assumed it was an emergency at the worksite, but it was from her. The message was short, brutally efficient, and utterly devoid of emotion. "Elias," it read, "I can't do this anymore. I've moved on. I've taken the funds from the account to start my new life. This is the cleanest way. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce." I read it, and the words just floated on the screen, meaningless symbols. It felt like a language I didn't understand, a joke, a mistake. My hands were shaking, covered in a thin layer of grime from the day's work as I fumbled to open my banking app. The satellite internet was agonizingly slow, each percentage point of the loading bar a turn of a knife in my gut. And then the page loaded. Our joint savings, the Phoenix Fund, the account that held 2 years of my life, my sacrifice, my entire future. Balance, $12.47. She hadn't just taken half. She hadn't just taken what she thought she was owed. She had taken everything, every last cent. The money for the house, the money for the materials, the money that was supposed to be the foundation of our new life. It was all gone. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed, the phone in my hand, and the roar of the dam outside was nothing compared to the roaring silence in my own head. I had been robbed, not by a stranger in the night, but by the one person in the world I thought I could trust. My partner, my wife. I tried to call her. The number was disconnected. I looked her up on social media, a place I rarely went. Her profile was locked, but her picture had been changed. It was her and another man, his arms slung possessively around her, the two of them clinking champagne glasses on the balcony of a sleek modern apartment I had never seen. The pain was a physical thing, a crushing weight that threatened to suffocate me. I was trapped, a prisoner in a work camp 1,000 miles from a home that no longer existed, a future that had been stolen. I was a ghost, a broke, heartbroken fool, and she was already toasting to her new life, a life paid for with the ruins of mine. I should have been destroyed. I should have crumbled, and a part of me did. But as I sat there, in the cold, pre-dawn gloom of my temporary life, another part of me, the engineer, the planner, the man who analyzes stress points and structural failures, took over. My grief was real, but my training was better. Cora thought she had committed the perfect crime. She thought she had executed a flawless, long-distance heist, leaving her victim powerless and stranded. She thought she had taken everything. She had no idea that the real theft had happened months ago. She had no idea that the foundation she thought she had dynamited was a decoy. And she had no idea that I was the one who had laid the charge. The seed of my own quiet betrayal was planted 6 months before Cora's text message. It wasn't a single dramatic event, but a slow, creeping erosion of trust. Our video calls, once the lifeline of my sanity, had become strained. She was vague about her days, evasive about our finances. Then came the piece of evidence I couldn't ignore. A notification from our joint credit card, an alert for a large, unusual charge. It was a consultation fee for a man named Julian Croft, one of the most ruthless, high-powered divorce attorneys in the city. A man you hire not for an amicable split, but for a corporate-style dismantling of a marriage. I felt a cold dread creep into my soul. She was planning. This wasn't a sudden crisis of love. It was a premeditated financial strategy. My first instinct was the one of a husband. I wanted to confront her, to demand an explanation, to fight for the life I thought we were building. But my second instinct, the one of an engineer, took over. You don't tell the enemy you've discovered their plans. You use that knowledge to build a better defense. I did not confront her. Instead, I began to build. I played the part of the loving, unsuspecting, and slightly oblivious husband. On our calls, I was warm and engaged. I talked excitedly about the Phoenix house, about our future, reinforcing the very dream she was planning to shatter. While she was plotting her heist, I was architecting. My first step was to create a new legal entity. I formed a sole proprietorship LLC, a simple, anonymous company I named Foundation Restorations. It was a name that made my heart ache with its irony. Through a lawyer in a different state, I opened a new series of business accounts under the LLC's name, accounts she had no knowledge of and no access to. My second step was the quiet, methodical transfer of assets. I started by redirecting my salary. I arranged for the bulk of my paycheck, the substantial sums from my high-risk, high-reward job, to be deposited directly into my new hidden LLC accounts. But I was careful. I didn't cut off the flow to our joint account completely. That would have raised a red flag. Instead, I kept depositing a smaller, but still significant portion into it, just enough to show a steady, healthy growth. Enough to keep the bait in the trap looking plump and appetizing. I then went after our other, shared investments. I systematically and quietly liquidated them, transferring the profits into my new, secure structure. To Cora, on the bank statement she occasionally looked at, it would appear as if our net worth was concentrated almost entirely in that one beautiful, vulnerable joint account, the Phoenix Fund. The account she was targeting was no longer our foundation. It was a stage. It was a beautifully crafted illusion of our total net worth, a sacrificial lamb I was leaving tied to a stake, waiting for the wolf I knew was coming. The emotional cost of this deception was immense. Every loving word I said to her on the phone felt like a lie. Every time I looked at her picture, the grief for the marriage that was already dead was a fresh, open wound. I was mourning a life while still pretending to live in it. But I was a man on a mission. My goal was not just to protect myself. It was to understand the sheer, calculated depth of her betrayal. I let her play her game. I let her believe she was the clever one, the one in control. I had to see it through to the end. So when she sent that final, life-altering text message, when I stared at the zero balance in our joint account, the pain was real. The shock was real. But underneath it all was the cold, grim satisfaction of an engineer whose calculations had been proven correct. The structure had failed exactly as I had predicted. She thought she had demolished our entire world. She had, in fact, only succeeded in blowing up a temporary decoy structure I had built for the sole purpose of her demolition. She had stolen the bait. She had no idea that the real prize, the vast majority of our shared wealth, the true foundation of my future, was safe and secure in a place she didn't even know existed. My final 6 months on the project were a masterclass in compartmentalization. I was a man living a double life. To my colleagues, I was the stoic, focused engineer, a man who had clearly received some bad news from home but was channeling it into his work with a grim, admirable professionalism. I worked harder than ever, my mind finding a strange, cold comfort in the certainties of physics and mathematics. But in the quiet hours of the night, in my small, lonely room, I was a strategist, an intelligence analyst in a war of my own making. I watched Cora's new life unfold through the distorted lens of social media. The man from her new profile picture was, of course, the one who had been encouraging her betrayal. His name was Jensen, a slick, handsome entrepreneur who dealt in the vague but glamorous world of lifestyle branding. He was a parasite, and he had found the perfect host in my wife, a woman with access to what they both believed was a massive, untraceable windfall. They were not subtle. They were a walking, talking cliché of new money. They leased a penthouse in the city's trendiest neighborhood. They bought a brand new, top-of-the-line luxury SUV. They took a spontaneous trip to Paris, filling their social media feeds with curated photos of their perfect stolen happiness. They were burning through the money from the decoy account with a speed that was both reckless and, to my grim satisfaction, incredibly helpful to my cause. Every dollar they spent was another nail in their own coffin. I did not interfere. I did not comment. I was a ghost, a silent observer. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Miss Albright, had received the divorce petition from Cora's attorney, Julian Croft. The document was a work of arrogant fiction. It claimed that the funds from the joint account constituted the entirety of our marital assets, and that Cora, in a gesture of profound generosity, was waiving any and all future claims to any other property or income in exchange for a swift, uncontested divorce. They were so confident that I was a broken, ignorant fool, stranded on the other side of the world, that they had laid their own legal trap. They were offering me a clean break, never imagining that I was the one who would benefit from it. On the advice of Miss Albright, I signed the papers immediately. I did not contest a single clause. My quiet, immediate compliance was the final, crucial piece of my plan. It was my signature on that document that legally and irrevocably severed Cora's connection to the massive hidden fortune held by my LLC. By greedily claiming the small, visible pot of gold, she had legally forfeited her rights to the mountain of treasure she didn't even know existed. She thought my signature was the act of a defeated man. In reality, it was the final, quiet click of a safe door locking her out forever. My project at the dam was finally completed. My contract was up. It was time to go home. The return was the opposite of the one I had once dreamed of. There was no loving wife waiting for me, no celebration. There was just the quiet, anonymous bustle of the airport and the beginning of a new, uncertain life. I didn't go back to our old house, which I knew was sitting empty, a monument to a dead dream. I rented a small, furnished apartment, a temporary command center. For the first time in 2 years, I was back on the same soil as the woman who had betrayed me. I let a month pass. I let them get comfortable. I let them believe they had gotten away with it, that the quiet, sad husband had faded back into the obscurity from which he had come. And then I decided it was time to present my final report. I was not interested in a screaming match or a dramatic confrontation. I was an engineer. I was interested in a structural assessment. I wanted to see her face when she realized that the beautiful, glittering skyscraper of her new life was built on a foundation of sand, and that the tide was coming in. I chose the location for our final meeting with a quiet, deliberate sense of irony. It was a small, independent bookstore cafe, the kind of place Cora and I used to love, a place that smelled of old paper and fresh coffee. It was a relic from the life she had so casually discarded. I sent her a simple, untraceable email from a new account. The subject line was, "The Phoenix Project." The body of the message was just an address, a date, and a time. I knew she would come. Her curiosity and her arrogance would not allow her to ignore it. She arrived looking exactly as she did in her social media photos, expensive, polished, and radiating a brittle, defensive confidence. Her new man, Jensen, was with her, a handsome, empty suit who looked deeply uncomfortable in a room full of books. They sat opposite me at a small, wobbly table, their expressions a mixture of condescending pity and wary suspicion. "Elias," Cora began, her voice dripping with a false, practiced sympathy. "I'm glad you reached out. I hope you're doing okay. I know this has been hard." "I'm managing," I said, my voice calm and even. I looked at Jensen. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm the man who funded your trip to Paris." Jensen flushed, a flicker of anger in his eyes, but Cora silenced him with a look. "What do you want, Elias?" she asked, her patience already wearing thin. "What do you want, Elias?" she asked, her patience already wearing thin. "Is this about money? The divorce is final. You signed the papers." "I did," I said, "and I want to thank you for that. Your lawyer was very thorough. Especially the part about waiving all future claims. That was a very clean way to end things." A look of confusion crossed her face. This was not the conversation she had expected. She had come prepared for a broken man begging for scraps. She was not prepared for a man who was thanking her. I leaned forward slightly. "I'm here to give you a final accounting of our marital assets," I said, my voice dropping to a quiet, confidential tone. "Just to make sure there are no loose ends. You see, you were right. The Phoenix Fund was our primary joint asset, and you took it, 100%. That was your choice." "It was my half," she snapped. "No," I said, my voice still quiet, but with an edge of steel. "It was our bait. You see, Cora, while you were planning your new life, I was planning my new company. It's called Foundation Restorations, an LLC. For the last 18 months, the vast majority of my salary, our investments, our real assets have been funneled into that company. A company that, according to the divorce papers you so eagerly signed, you have absolutely no claim to." I watched the color drain from her face. I saw the frantic calculations in her eyes as she tried to process my words. Jensen just stared, his jaw slack, the empty-headed parasite finally realizing that his host was not just sick, but terminally ill. "The money you took," I continued, pressing my advantage, "the money you have been so enthusiastically spending was approximately 10% of our total net worth. A generous severance package, you might say. But by taking it and by signing those papers, you legally and irrevocably walked away from the other 90%. You didn't execute a heist, Cora. You fell for a buyout, and the price was your own future." The silence at the table was profound. Cora just stared at me, her perfect, curated world crumbling around her in real time. The expensive clothes, the new car, the penthouse apartment, they were all liabilities, debts bought with a tiny fraction of a fortune she had just discovered she had thrown away. "So I wanted to thank you," I said, standing up, the meeting over. "You wanted the cleanest way, and you gave it to me. You ended our marriage and disinherited yourself in a single efficient text message. It was a masterstroke of financial self-sabotage." I looked at her, at the woman I had once loved, and I felt nothing but a vast, empty distance. She had not just been a bad wife, she had been a bad strategist, and in my world, that was an unforgivable sin. "I'm going to go and buy that old Victorian house now," I said, "the Phoenix. It's time to raise it from the ashes, alone." I placed a $10 bill on the table to cover our coffees. "Good luck with your new life," I said. "It looks like you're going to need it." And then I turned and walked away, leaving her in the quiet, book-scented ruins of her own greed. I didn't look back. I had a foundation to restore. That was today's story on Reddit Whispers. We all carry a breaking point. What was yours? Share in the comments, because you never know who needs to read it today.